Hello and welcome today to my channel. I am going to share my thoughts about the latest blog post that I have added to my website. And I have to say, I am so excited to share with you today. I have so many thoughts. And if you know me in person, you know that I love to talk and I process while I'm talking. And so it seems that I always have something to say. And I'm going to try not to go on and on today, but I do have some things I want to share about this post. And not all of these things are in the post because like I said, I kind of, as I talk, things come to my mind and I share sometimes some personal things. So let's jump in. So our post today is about that stories heal us even when they're not written down. And I'm just going to start reading and then I'm just going to, kind of go talk as I go. I have always loved stories. And I'm just going to stop right here. And I think I've said it before, but I have a huge imagination. I always have as a little girl. My mother has told me stories about imaginary friends. I had an imaginary husband. I had children. I changed my name. I mean, the whole deal. And so imagination is such a huge part of stories. And so I'm going to keep going. Books, of course, but also the kind told across a dinner table or whispered on a front porch or shared with a friend at just the right moment. Some of the most healing stories in my life were never written on paper. So if you've ever been with someone who shared a part of their life with you and it struck a nerve with you, you resonated with what they were saying and you were able to feel what they're feeling and just kind of embrace the whole atmosphere of everything that was happening at that time, those moments stay with us. And I'm going to say, as this says, it brings healing to us. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, why. I'm going to keep on going. Stories remind us that we are not alone. And that's it right there. When someone else names the fear, grief, or joy we have felt, it loosens something inside of us. It gives shape to feelings we could not form on our own. Have you ever picked up a book, started reading a story? I don't care if it's fiction or nonfiction. I've had this happen with both, or listened to a video, or even watched a movie. And suddenly you're like, oh my goodness, I know exactly what they mean. I can feel it. And you may not have been able to have said those words yourself, but you are able to just suddenly feel like, wow, I thought I was the only one. I'm not alone in this. So I'm going to read a verse here from the Amplified Bible. It says, Jesus understood all of this, and he did. And this is a verse from Matthew 13:34. Again, in the Amplified version, it says, these things all taken together, Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. So Jesus spoke these words. These were stories that were actually told in person. We talked, at the beginning of this about, being with someone, a dinner table, a front porch, a friend, a neighbor, whatever, over coffee and sharing things. Jesus, he explained things in a very personal way to them. They could look right at him. And yet we also have those stories in his word, in the book, in the Bible. So we have both. We have, he expressed himself in both ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He spoke the words and then they were written down and shared, and we can take those today. I'm going to keep reading. He knew truth could travel straight to the heart when wrapped in story. What I find beautiful is that stories work both ways. And this is, oh my goodness, this is so, so true. They heal the teller and the listener. Speaking a story out loud can be a way of unburdening. Hearing it can be a way of being seen. And that is why sharing our lives matter. I know in my own life, and I've already, full disclosure, I'm a talker. I think this is part of the reason why, because as I talk, I process things and it brings healing to my own heart and my own spirit. When I hear somebody else's story and they're doing the talking and I'm doing the listening, it allows me to realize, as I mentioned earlier, that I am not the only person who has experienced this. One of the biggest lies of the enemy is to tell you that nobody else has gone through what you're going through. Nobody else has felt what you're feeling. Nobody else has done the things that you have done. My friends, I am here today to tell you that is a lie. That is a lie straight from the pit. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. There is nothing that you have said, nothing that you have done, nothing that you have thought that surprises the Lord. I mean, that blesses me because, I sometimes think, wow, I am just such a mess. I've got this going on. I don't understand this. What does this mean? And back and forth. And we sabotage ourselves sometimes because we think the worst about ourselves. And so the truth is, and that's what we're always after, is truth. The truth is that Jesus already knows all of it. And he knows you and he knows your heart. And does everybody else know you and know your heart? Probably not. Do some people? Yes. But at the end of the day, the fact that he gets me, he knows me, he knows my heart, is such a peaceful attitude to have. And so I'm going to carry on here. I also believe stories hold power because they point us to a bigger story. Every glimpse of redemption, every tale of loss and restoration echoes the gospel itself. Our lives, messy as they are, become chapters in that great narrative. One of the things that I feel so prompted of the Lord to do is to share restoration, to share redemption, to encourage people to realize that I don't care how far down you've gone or you feel, there is a way out, there is a way up. Because regardless of how prestigious someone may be, regardless of how much education, how much money, how much success, we're all struggling. And we all have some messiness in our lives. Do some people have more than others? Yes. But one of the things I've learned is that life goes, it goes in waves. And there will be times when things feel pretty good. It doesn't mean that, things are perfect, but it's not going to be perfect till we get to heaven, right? But things are okay. And then there's times when it feels like everything is a mess. But those times move on. And so remembering that there is a bigger picture, there is a bigger story, there is a bigger God who has everything under control brings me peace, even in the midst of those very messy times. I'm going to keep reading. I want to listen more closely to the stories around me, not just the ones in books. I want to be slow to dismiss the ordinary details someone chooses to share, because often those details are where the healing begins. It's one thing to do talking, to be the talker, and it's another thing to be the listener. I tend to talk a lot, and therefore I have a few people in my life. They don't know who they are. I've never told them. I probably should. But they are my listening people. I can ramble on and on and on, and they just listen. And they affirm that they're hearing me, and they make some comments. It's not like they're staring off into space. But I feel heard. And being heard, feeling heard, knowing that someone else cares enough to listen to you is such a blessing. And so I pray that I can be a better listener. Sometimes it's a little harder for me because if you've ever talked to somebody, you know that they're just thinking of the next thing that they're going to say. They're not really listening to you. And so I pray the Lord would help me to do better with that. But at the end of the day, I want to be a listener because people's stories are important. The things that people share, the details are little bits and pieces of them, of their life, of their thoughts, of their experiences. I'm going to keep on reading. We live in a world quick to move past people's words. Is that not absolutely the truth? But healing often comes in the pause, in the space where someone feels free to tell their story. And that's one of the things that I think is so important, and one of the ways that I always want to show up is I want anybody who wants to or who needs to share their story, who needs a listening ear, who has something that they need to unload. I want to be a good listener. I want to be sensitive to that. And I don't want to just take it like putting in my time or doing it because I have to. I want this to be an extension of my faith in Jesus and how I can be a blessing to someone else. May we create more of those spaces. May we tell our stories with courage and listen with grace. I think that's so powerful. And I will say this, telling our story sometimes does require courage. I tend to be very much of an open book, which I think probably makes my family nervous sometimes. I try to be very cognizant and careful not to throw anybody under the bus while doing that. But I also always want to be real. I always want to be honest with you. I always want to be true to who I am and to who God has called me to be. And sometimes sharing truth and sharing things from our heart can be hard, but it's also freeing. Because one of the things that we can do if we're not careful is we can close up those stories within us. We can close up our thoughts. We can close up our emotions, and we can kind of just shut it down in fear of being judged, in fear of being misunderstood, in fear of thinking that I'm too much, in fear of, what are people going to think about me? And am I even normal? And on and on and on we can go. Again, those are lies from the enemy. He loves to taunt us. He loves to torment us. He loves to accuse us. But it takes courage. I've been listening to a book by Brene Brown, and full disclosure, she sometimes uses language that I do not use, and she's not, somebody that everybody would want to listen to. But the bottom line is she says, be courageous, be weird, be real. And that's how I want to show up. Not necessarily that I try to be weird, but if there's a little bit of weirdness in me, I'm going to say there's probably a little bit of weirdness in all of us. And we don't need to be afraid of that. We don't need to step back and think, oh, what's everybody? No, that's what makes you, you. When you look at all the people in the world, each one of us has something that makes us special. And there's always going to be somebody judging. There's always going to be somebody raising an eyebrow. There's always going to be somebody saying, oh, you can't do that. And I'm here today to say, yes, you can. You can do the hard things. Okay, well, I have rambled on longer than what I had planned on, but I want you to know today that I am so thrilled to have you on this journey. I am so excited to share my story with you. I'm making good progress. It's been a very, very productive week, and I am so excited. I've made some connections with some amazing writers and other people involved in this industry, and it has been a blessing. I've received some emails from people who have affirmed me and encouraged me, and what a blessing. So if this is a blessing to you, If you've made it this far, please, please send me an email. Just reply back to this if you get it in a newsletter, or you can just send me an email at tracy@tracygimble.com, and I would love to hear from you. All right, folks, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.